Cue the confetti. You're here, and that's a big deal. Subscribe to keep the good times rolling, shall we? You know how this whole thing got started? It was over something silly, a fight that was so trivial I can't even recall how it began. A few days later, I suggested we set aside some time over the weekend to just be together. No errands, no other distractions. Whether it was going for a walk, having dinner, or just doing something to remind us that we were still a married duo, not just two people sharing bills. She didn't even look up from scrolling on her phone. With a sarcastic tone, she said, "You'll get intimacy when I feel like it." She glanced up briefly to smirk before returning to her scrolling. I stood there stunned, feeling warmth rush to my ears. I didn't shout or even let out a sigh. I didn't ask what she meant. I just forced a smile, turned my back and walked away. That smile wasn't about sarcasm or anger. It was more like realization hitting me hard and fast. In that moment, everything fell into place. It wasn't just about this argument or even just this marriage. I saw this long-standing pattern, how I'd been bending over backwards for someone who had checked out of the relationship a long time ago. She didn't literally follow me, but I could feel her gaze fixed on my back. I bet a small part of her knew, right then, that something had changed. She might have thought she won, but I wasn't retreating. I was moving on. Later that night, in bed, we lay turned away from each other. I could hear the faint movements of her phone screen. My side of the bed felt like the edge of a cliff, cold air separating us that no one dared to cross. I didn't bother trying. I just stared up at the ceiling, my mind racing. It wasn't fear I felt, but clarity. I thought about how we ended up here. 5 years ago, she was kind and gentle, always laughing at my silly jokes and holding me close when I had a rough day. Our connection wasn't just about the physical aspect, it was a source of comfort in our lives. At least that's what I believed. Then subtle changes snuck in. Small things at first, like less holding hands, more nights when she said she was too tired, shared laughter becoming rare, and answers turning into short responses. I kept blaming it on stress, work, finding any excuse rather than face the truth. She'd stay up late watching shows I didn't even know she liked, her back turned to me. Whenever I gently tried to bring it up, she'd roll her eyes, calling me sensitive or, worse, needy. So I stepped back, burying myself in work, acting like the reliable husband who didn't complain. But all it got me was more silence, more distance, and more cold. I didn't share how bad it had become. Not with my brother, not at work, not even with my best friend, the one I used to confide in about everything. Part of it was embarrassment. Part of me hoped she'd come around if only I gave her space. That the woman I married was still in there somewhere, beneath stress or whatever cause I'd imagined. But tonight changed everything. It wasn't just the words she said, it was how she said them. Like intimacy was some prize I hadn't earned. Like I should be grateful for whatever bits I got. You'll get intimacy when I feel like it. That clinched it, finally giving voice to what she'd been silently conveying for years. And I finally understood. I stopped struggling for something that was long gone. No anger, no pleading, no more reaching for a connection that was never going to happen. Just a smile, a quiet walk down the hallway. This silence was mine. Soon everything else would be too. She didn't know it yet, but I'd started packing. Quietly, bit by bit, I started getting ready to take my life elsewhere. The first step was to stop trying. Nothing dramatic or confrontational, no big conversations. Nope, this was the quiet type. The kind that sneaks in like a cool breeze through a tiny open window, a chill you hardly notice. I quit reaching for her hand on the couch. I didn't ask if she wanted coffee in the mornings, and I stopped with the little texts and gifts that used to mean hope. The most surprising thing? She didn't react. Maybe she liked it at first. Maybe she thought having someone entirely revolve around her was power, until the day they just stopped. But what she didn't get was when someone stops revolving, they don't just stay put, they start drifting away. That's exactly what I was doing, drifting fast. I started getting up earlier than she did, not because I had anywhere pressing to go, but to escape the tense silence that filled our mornings. The way she'd drift into the kitchen without a word, barely acknowledging me like I was just another fixture. So I began leaving the house before she even came in, sitting in my car with a coffee, just taking a moment to breathe. It was like taking the first real breath in forever. I found myself back at the gym, not out of some desire to reinvent myself as some kind of revenge version, but because I needed an outlet that wasn't the empty house we both lived in. I rediscovered the satisfaction of feeling strong, of breaking a sweat, pushing myself, forgetting about the roles of husband and provider for a while, and I noticed other people were seeing me again. Not just women, but anyone who actually noticed me, unlike her, who treated me like background noise. But I was no fool. I wasn't doing any of this to get back at her or cheat. That wasn't me. It was about finding myself again. About a week after we'd had a big fight, she started to notice things were different. I'd just come back from the gym, not in a rush, around 8. Dinner was already done, just some takeout judging by the scattered boxes. She was lounged on the couch in her robe, absorbed in Netflix, a half-empty wine glass nearby. "You're late," she mumbled, eyes still glued to the TV. "Didn't realize there was a curfew," I retorted, dropping my keys. That made her snap her eyes up, surprised I had the nerve to say that. She watched as I quietly cleaned up the mess she left. Not a single word of complaint from me. "You okay?" she asked, more curious than truly worried. "Better than I've been in ages," I replied, and it seemed to jolt her. She looked at me, trying to figure out what had changed, but didn't dig any further, and I didn't offer more. The days following were much the same. I stayed calm, polite, even helped out, but I stopped being so tied to her. I didn't reach out, didn't ask her anything, felt no jealousy, not even a hint of interest, and it seemed to unsettle her. She tried pushing my buttons in subtle ways, slipping into bed wearing lingerie instead of her usual worn-out shirts, suddenly curious about my day. But I wasn't biting. I kept things respectful and courteous. But she was no longer at the center of my world. She wasn't even on the list of my top priorities. Then the money dynamic shifted. I'd always been the one handling our finances, bills, savings, investments, taxes. She liked to think she was independent, but she never paid attention to the credit card statements unless something popped up that she didn't agree with. So I made some changes, small ones. Canceled a couple of subscriptions she didn't realize I was paying for. Moved a portion of my paycheck into a personal account she couldn't touch. Started planning budgets for a future where I was on my own. At first she didn't notice, but eventually she would. The control she thought she had slowly slipping from her perfectly manicured fingers. For me, it wasn't about sex. It was about control, choosing to walk away from her game. The way she started watching me gave away what she was feeling. Not love, not renewed interest. No, it was calculated, suspicious, like she felt something slipping but couldn't figure out where it was leaking from. When I'd walk into a room, I'd feel her eyes on me behind her phone. She'd throw out random questions trying to be nonchalant, like, "Who you been texting?" Or, "Why are you all dressed up to hit the gym?" But the warmth never reached her eyes. She thought I was cheating. The irony almost made me laugh. I wasn't cheating, wasn't even flirting. I was just feeling alive again, and that was uncharted territory for her. Because in her eyes, I had always been the steady one. Her rock, the dependable husband who didn't stray, who didn't question, who kept the peace. There was this strange awkwardness that had come over her, not quite meshing with her usual self. She saw it in me, the shift, the fact that I wasn't just orbiting around our shared life anymore. Slowly, I started picking up on bits and pieces that hinted at what was really going on beneath the surface. The first clue came through her friend, Rachel. Rachel was loud and single, a woman my wife had always kept at a distance until recently. I ran into her on a routine grocery trip. She was by the wine section, and when she saw me, her surprise was clear. "Hey there," she said, clearly shocked. "Didn't expect to see you here." I shrugged and said, "Why wouldn't I be?" Rachel hesitated, almost like she was about to spill something big, but then she decided to play it cool. "Oh, no reason. Just thought you might be swamped with work," she backpedaled. While I let it go, the look in her eyes stuck with me. It was like she almost gave away more than she wanted. That moment kept replaying in my mind that night. I checked our shared digital calendar, the tool we both use to keep our lives in sync. Recently, it was loaded with mysterious entries like consult, wellness, creative check-in. To anyone else, they meant nothing, but I knew she wasn't into any creative projects or consulting gigs. She brushed off my questions, saying they were personal stuff I wouldn't care about. Normally, I'd agree, until now. I crossed a line, something you don't do when trust is supposed to be a given. I calmly but decisively checked her phone. It was a quiet night, her asleep beside me. Using her fingerprint, I went through her messages, starting with the everyday ones, until I found the gaps, the places where messages had been deleted. And then I found it, hidden like a teen's trick app. Inside was a second phone number, just digits sewn into conversations that gnawed at me. Comments like, "Can't stop thinking about yesterday," and "He hasn't touched me in ages," hinted at a reality I hadn't wanted to see. Her comments about me being too passive cut deeper. That's what she thought of me, and I had held our life together, faced all its challenges, only to find she saw that as weakness. I kept reading, saw the flirtations, the stabbing remarks about me being just a tool in her life. It wasn't just cheating, it was contempt. I didn't plan a loud showdown or plead for answers. I saw the situation clearly. It called for a precise move, a clean break. But I needed to know one last thing. Who was fueling her fantasy world? I reverse looked up the number, and when the name came up, it was like time stopped. It was someone I knew but never suspected. We worked together, a friendly guy from IT with his own family. My wife always said he was safe, like a golden retriever she respected. He'd been handy with her laptop once, fixed it when taxes were due, and she'd been grateful. Now it turns out he was more than a tech fixer for her. Seeing their exchanges tied the last bit together. I realized she never had the upper hand over me. She hid behind the silence I'd withdrawn into, scared of what she'd see if we faced reality. But stepping away from being her mirror left her unsteady. I moved forward, driven by the need for a clarity clearer than truth itself. There was a charged stillness between us, like waiting for an inevitable storm. She didn't know I was onto her yet, but my understanding was a tension, ready to snap at any moment. Her world seemed shaky, no matter how hard she tried to play normal. Her eyes flitted to me at dinner, and she stumbled over words when I didn't react like before. I felt like a stranger in my own home, a stranger she feared because he didn't depend on her anymore. One evening, she decided to try and spice things up by slipping into that black negligee I'd gotten her for our anniversary 3 years ago. Standing there in the bedroom doorway, she seemed like a ghost from happier times, trying to breathe life into something that was already long gone. But I didn't even look up from my book. "I'm tired," I muttered while flipping a page. It was a long day. At that point, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Rejection, the first real emotion I'd seen from her in ages. She hated that feeling, hated losing control. But that's the difference between us now. While she played games, I was making strategic moves, like chess. My first move was well underway. Quietly consulting with a lawyer, I was methodically collecting texts, app messages, and screenshots. In our state, infidelity didn't automatically win a case, but combined with financial deceit, hidden purchases, and secret accounts, it became a significant advantage, and I had plenty of that. Timing was key. I bided my time until the morning she left for her so-called wellness retreat, a weekend she claimed was for self-care. But I knew the truth. It was a rendezvous with him at a cabin 3 hours away. I found out because they booked it together using an email account she thought was secret, one that she forgot was linked to our shared tablet. She believed I'd be buried in work all weekend. I let her think that. I watched her pack, gave her a goodbye kiss on the cheek, wished her a relaxing trip, and as soon as she departed, I began the next phase. Froze and separated our bank accounts, canceled the joint credit card, and ended her luxury car lease. Unbeknownst to her, it was pinned under my name the whole time. By the time she reached the cabin, her phone would be flooded with alerts of declined payments and cancellations, shifting her confusion to panic and eventually to utter desperation. I didn't need or want the drama of a confrontation in the woods. I wanted her to sit there with the very man for whom she wrecked our marriage and feel everything fall apart. To realize he wasn't her knight in shining armor, and that she was running away from something, not toward something. That night I sent her a simple text. "When you return, don't come home. Papers are coming Monday. Straightforward, no punctuation, no fury, just the facts. I didn't block her. I wanted her to reach out, clutching at what she thought was still hers. She didn't let me down. Wait, what are you talking about? We need to have a conversation. This is crazy. You're blowing this out of proportion. Are you seriously doing this? Throwing everything away? And the one that just made me sigh, not laugh, not cry, just exhale, was, "You're so dramatic. You're not the kind of guy to walk away like this." That was it. Her last grasping at straws, clutching at her fantasy version of me, the steady, accommodating guy she thought she knew. She had no idea that man, the one who put up with her antics, was history. I didn't reply that night, and I slept more soundly than I had in years. Sunday night rolls around, and even though I told her not to, she came back and tried her keys. I'd changed the locks already. From my vantage point by the side window, I watched her stand in the porch light looking exhausted and, for once, uncertain. She knocked, yelled my name, and eventually slumped against the door, her voice breaking into sobs. By sunrise, she was gone, leaving behind only her wounded pride, a broken heel, and a faint trace of mascara on the doorpost. Later, I reviewed the security footage to be sure. She lingered for almost an hour, alternating between crying, texting, and seemingly pleading with the night sky. Then she got up, pulled herself together as if nothing happened, and walked back to her car with her typical air. I made sure the papers were served to her on Monday, just as promised, at her office where she once thrived on admiration. It wasn't about shaming her. It was about ceasing to protect an image. That was a job for a husband, and I had quit that role. The quiet that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had in all our years. It was so quiet. No texts, no calls, absolutely nothing. The stillness felt like that strange calm after a huge fire, where everything's charred but the smoke's still swirling. For a little while, it was kind of peaceful. I just went on with my usual routine. Work, gym, meals, laughs, the whole 9 yards. But then slowly, it started to dawn on me. I made some missteps. I wanted to talk things through because, well, we were still married, right? But it wasn't anger pushing me. It wasn't only about the cheating anymore. It became more about breaking free, freeing myself from the mind games, the deceit, the constant manipulation. Those things she brushed off like they were just par for the course as marriage's age. She thought she could just assume everything would stay the same. I'd never really stood up for myself before. When I finally did, she assumed I'd fold, that I'd crawl back, seeking closure, yearning for answers or maybe an apology. But I wasn't seeking closure. That door was already closed for me. All I longed for was some peace, and I found it. After a bit, she stopped reaching out. Our mutual friend mentioned she'd moved into a small apartment near her sister, got herself a rental car, and even started seeing a therapist. The guy she was secretly seeing, the cheerful, kind of like a puppy type, he faded out of the picture once the financial support dried up, making him less charming. Too bad, but she didn't lose everything. I didn't want revenge. I didn't strip her of the house or anything else. I just reclaimed what was mine. My time, my energy, my loyalty, my silence. Those were more precious than she ever recognized. The last time I saw her was a few weeks after everything was finalized. I was grabbing a coffee, and she happened to walk in. She had on sunglasses, no makeup, and her hair was pulled back differently, sort of simpler, more authentic. She paused when she noticed me. I gave a polite nod and went back to waiting for my drink. After it was ready, she spoke. "You look good," she said cautiously. I returned the smile, not smug, just satisfied. "I feel good." She stared like she was searching for the old me, something she could reconnect with. But that was gone. As I turned to leave, I said one last thing. "You used to say I'd get closeness when you felt like it." She started to reply, maybe to defend herself, maybe to apologize. I didn't stick around to find out. Just stepped into the daylight, sipped my coffee, and let her see me walk away. She watched everything she thought she had slip through her fingers, because really her power was just my consent, and I finally took it back.